and welcome to WonderLab, where we seek to ignite your curiosity. My name is Cheryl Gerken, and I'm the Educational Outreach Coordinator here at Arizona Public Media, and we are so excited about today's program, which highlights some amazing inhabitants of our beautiful Sonoran Desert. We have some very special guests in store for you, and one of those guests is Robin Kropp, Education Specialist at the Arizona-Sonora Desert Museum. Welcome, Robin. We're so happy to have you.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. So tell us a little bit about what you brought here. We've got some really interesting objects that I'm sure we would love to hear more about.
Yeah, well, so I brought a little smattering of some of the wonderful things that live here in our Sonoran Desert.
Okay, great.
And of course, we're going to talk a lot about the saguaro cactus because that is the signature plant, right? People come to Tucson and the Sonoran Desert, but they come to Tucson to see this plant from all over the world. So we're going to talk a lot about that one today.
Cool.
But first, I wanted to ask you, if you're thinking about an animal or a plant living out here in the Sonoran Desert, what do you think some of the big challenges to life are? What do you have to deal with if you are living here day in and day out and you don't have the AC to retreat to?
Right. And then I'm going to go back and think about my experience in the summer, which is heat.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about lack of water.
Definitely.
And I'm also looking at some spiny things here. So I would say maybe spines.
Well, it depends on your point of view, right? Spines, if you're a cactus, are very useful. So we'll get into that.
But so great.
The two that you mentioned then are fantastic: heat and lack of water, right? Those are the two huge challenges. But if you also think about temperature extremes, it's not always hot in our desert. And we've had some really cold, wintry days these last, this winter as well. So if you're out there, especially if you're that saguaro and you're stuck there day after day, year after year, you have to deal with both of those extremes. But heat obviously is going to be the big one because it's trying to steal your water. Right. The hotter it is, the more water evaporates. And so, yeah. So,
and fire too, which is another
and that
threat.
fuels fire. So we'll talk about that as well.
Great.
Wow. So let's get started with the saguaro because I always like to begin with that plant. You think about it, it's this incredible desert survivor. And I have our little potted saguaro over here that we can be referring to. I want you to look at that plant. And first of all, think about how it's really good at collecting water, because think about when it rains here. Does it rain all the time in our desert? What times of year do we normally get rain in the Sonoran Desert?
Well, I'm thinking monsoons are our big treasure.
Excellent.
And then winter rains.
Yeah.
Sporadic winter rains.
Exactly. So we have rainy seasons, kind of two pulses of rainy seasons throughout the year. And so if you're a plant that can store water, that's wonderful because you get water twice in the year, right? Two big chunks. So a saguaro is perfect because they are what we call a succulent. They store water inside. And right here I have an example of a cross section. We call this a saguaro cookie, but you would not want to try this cookie. You'd break your teeth. This is a dried piece of an arm that fell off of a saguaro. And if you look at the inside, you can see how there's all this spongy tissue, right? If I show you a live chunk of a cactus that I have in my yard, you can see how it actually is wet and slimy on the inside. Can you all see that slime?
Oh, so are saguaros slimy like that also?
Saguaros would be slimy too, but I obviously didn't want to cut open this one. So we have these plants growing all over our yards and parks around Tucson.
And you eat those.
And we eat these, right. Nopalitos.
Nopalitos.
Yes. So inside the cactus is wet and slimy and sticky, and that's how the moisture is. But on the outside, it has this really hard, waxy skin. And that helps. It's almost like the exterior of a water bottle. If I took a water bottle and I put it out in a parking lot in July, but it was sealed tight, the water inside of it wouldn't evaporate. So it's very similar in a way.
Interesting.
That exterior skin holds that water in. And then, of course, the plant itself is built to collect water. So when you see a big, tall saguaro out there, they have those long, we call them like pleats, and the channels in between
sort of like an accordion.
Yeah, so it can swell and store water, but that water also, those pleats work like little canals that channel water down the surface of the plant when it rains on the plant, right to the roots. So it can slurp that water up that falls on its body.
That's so interesting.
And then they stretch their roots as far around the plant as the plant is tall. So you can have a 40-foot tall saguaro with roots all around it in all directions.
So do they have a main taproot as well?
Yeah, it gives them a bit of an anchor, but the roots extend very shallow, and that allows them to suck up that water that falls
just a little
into the
trickle,
surface.
right? Those little trickles we get.
Yeah, because it doesn't always penetrate very far down into the soil. So we call them super suckers. They're just really good at collecting any moisture that falls during those intermittent rainstorms that we get. So as you said, they're like an accordion. They swell up, they hold that water, and then they shrink slowly over time as they use that water.
Right.
Now plants, they're food factories, right? Now I've not ever walked into my neighborhood grocery store and seen a saguaro walking down the aisle with a basket. They make food for themselves and everybody else, right? And if they're doing that, we have plenty of sunlight to fuel that process here. They have their stored water, but something I love to share with people is how cactus plants breathe.
Oh.
Okay,
right.
So you think about plants breathing, right?
Right.
And usually the food factories of plants are in the leaves.
Right.
They're in the green parts of the plant.
Right.
So leaves have little mouths, little holes, right? And they lose moisture as they breathe. And they're usually doing that in the daylight because they're making their food with the sun energy.
Right.
This plant right now is holding its breath. And it's not going to open those little holes. They open up at night to breathe. And they store the carbon dioxide they need to make their food in their tissues as an acid, and then they use that in the presence of the daylight with their stored water to make their food.
So why at night?
What do you think?
Well, there's not the stress of the heat and the sun to accelerate evaporation.
Exactly.
So at night. So is that true not just with saguaros, but with all our cacti?
All cacti and succulents like agaves, they also have that kind of special photosynthesis.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
So when you walk in the desert, next time you take a hike,
Feel
imagine they're
that
all
breathing.
holding their breath. Or when you take a night hike, you'll be getting lots of oxygen coming out. Right?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So you think about then this plant, and they can get really tall and they can live, 150 or more years. Every year they're able to produce food for others, and they do that at the hottest, driest time of year, right? So they start to flower in May and June, and then their fruits are ripe early July and into, in June and July. So they're flowering in May, they're producing fruit in June. It's triple-digit days. There's no other food source out there.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, they're providing food and all these resources, but then of course they also provide homes. Yeah,
right,
so we have
Cactus
here,
Hotel.
the Cactus Hotel, and this is an example again of a big chunk of saguaro, and this one has a hole going here. If this were in nature, it would actually be oriented this way. Can you hold up that?
Sure.
That's kind of what you would see coming down underneath this cavity right here.
Right.
Cavities,
So
right? Cavities are not only in your teeth.
It's really big.
This is what we call a saguaro cavity or a saguaro boot. And these are holes. The word cavity just means a hole.
Right.
And so who makes the holes in the saguaro? You mentioned it just a moment ago.
The woodpeckers?
Yeah, woodpeckers will make those holes and they use them as nesting places, but they don't always stick around and use the same nest year after year. And so that leaves those holes available to other birds that might want to move in.
So then they build their nest down here.
And you think about it, so the way that nest forms, it's if you fall and you cut your knee, you're not going to continue to bleed forever.
Right.
Your body makes a scab, right? So that's sort of a scab or a callus that the plant makes. And it does it very quickly because, again, they're trying to protect that stored moisture.
Right.
So they're going to make that hard callus outside or around where the woodpecker has packed and made.
Like how long does that take? Do you guys,
I think from what I've read, maybe just weeks. It doesn't take very long for it to solidify. Yeah.
Cool.
And so the woodpeckers will make these holes, and then you think about it, it's kind of like a nice cozy adobe house because you have all this stored water outside of your nest. Yeah, so it's warm in the nighttime when the desert air is cool, and cool in the daytime because of the way the water in the cactus, it maintains its temperature a little more slowly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's perfect. So speaking of providing, beyond food, hashan provides housing.
Right.
And we already talked about how the woodpeckers make the holes, and other cavity nesters, other birds will use those holes too. So we have a couple of different species of, well, you tell me, who else do you think lives in the holes around here?
Well, I see a lot of cactus wrens, but I know that they make their nests, I think, in choyas often.
Yeah, so they usually make their own nest out of some smaller twigs and sticks and
right,
and that kind of thing.
So
they might move in and inhabit one, but generally it's other birds that do.
So I'm thinking owls, perhaps?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we have several species, well, several. We have 3 small species of owls that live within the Sonoran Desert region.
Because to fit into
this. So their bodies are small enough to go into that hole and go and get inside of there. And then they don't really do much with the nest. They will lay their eggs in the bottom of that nest and use that. They don't have to put a lot of twigs or, you know, they might put some feathers in there to keep them soft.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So would you like to meet one of those nesters?
Yes.
All right.
I would love to. Oh, this is so exciting.
Yeah. So this is one of our little western screech owls from the Desert Museum. This is little Albert. Little Owl for short.
Albert.
And these animals, this is a great example. We also have an elf owl, which is another species in our desert that's even smaller than him. So he's a full-grown adult, and that would be the perfect nest home or hole for him to use. They range throughout the western U.S., and so in other places they might use a hollow in a tree that a woodpecker has also made. Right. Very rarely they might use a cliff, like a cavern in a cliff or something, as a nest cavity. But in our area, they love to use saguaro cacti. Oh,
that's so fabulous.
Yes. So this owl would be looking for one of these uninhabited saguaro nests that a woodpecker has abandoned.
Okay, I have a quick question.
Okay.
How do they know it's uninhabited? Like, especially if it's this deep.
Right.
Like, what's the signal?
You watch.
Occupy.
Yeah, right. No vacancy. You watch and see if anybody's going in and out. You know, if you're living in this environment, you're very aware of who's around you, right?
Right.
So the woodpeckers, I don't know if you've ever had a Gila woodpecker in your neighborhood. They're very loud.
They're very loud.
It's pretty obvious when they're home or when they're not.
Right. Okay. Which maybe is that why they are partially so loud that
Possibly,
they want to broadcast like, yo, this is my spot.
Exactly, for sure. And so he would do the same thing. If he found an abandoned nest cavity that he thought would be suitable, he would stake it out and he would call, and he would use their call is great. It's kind of it sounds like a bouncing ball. It starts out slow and gets faster and faster.
Oh, interesting.
So it goes something like, hoo, 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 hoo.
Ah.
He's like, you're not saying it right. I do have my little owl collar. Let me show you what it really sounds like. So I don't think he's going to want to do it, but we'll see. So fast, faster, 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 slow, faster. Yeah. So
does he respond ever? Like, can you tell? Can you notice?
He doesn't tend to. He doesn't usually respond. But if he were courting a female, she would be chorusing back and forth with him. He'd be calling her in saying, hey, this is where I found a nice home. We could use this. Do you want to get together and have a family? So that would be his call. And she would chorus back and forth with him. He might also present her with some food rewards, you know, like, hey, room and board.
Little enticement.
Yeah. A little enticement.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah, so that would be what he'd be up to. And then if they did choose to use that nest cavity and raise a family there, they will incubate those eggs for, it's usually the female who will hang out on the eggs and stay with the nestlings for their first weeks of life. So she's very committed to being in that nest with the eggs and then with the young. Okay. So he's out really busy hunting for food to sustain her. And then when the nestlings are born, to keep them going.
Double duty.
Yeah, and when the nestlings get to be about 3 weeks old, you know, it gets really crowded in there.
Right.
And mom doesn't stay inside anymore. So she will go and help, and they get really hungry.
Take turns.
Right? So the babies are out there demanding
squawking.
Food.
Yes.
So mom and dad both do the hunting to provision those young in the nest. So after about a month, they will fledge the nest, but then they stick around with mom and dad for maybe 5 more weeks after that. So they'll kind of, be nearby. Mom and dad will be kind of showing them the ropes and how to find their food and how to look out for predators.
Oh, thank you, Robin. That is just so amazing to be able to see such an incredible creature up close.
You are so welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this tortoise's name is Poppy.
Poppy.
After one of its favorite foods. And I'm gonna say her favorite food because to me Poppy sounds like a female name, but we won't know for sure if this is a male or female tortoise until they reach maturity. So about 13 or so years old.
So it's going to get much bigger.
Yeah, it's going to get bigger. And then you have a shell in front of you that's intact, the whole shell, the large one.
Oh, the large one.
If you look at the underside of that shell, you can kind of hold it up. See how that one has a concavity, a little curve on the underside? We know this is a male's shell, but the females have a flat belly plate, and the smaller shell next to you does have a flat.
On the bottom?
Yeah, a flat
Oh, yes, I
plastron.
see. Oh, I see.
So that would be a female.
Right.
And also the males have a bit longer, that little horn that juts out in the front, that's a little bit larger on the male shell than the female shell.
And now I see this one split.
Yeah.
Poppies.
So Poppy is a great example of a young tortoise. And these animals are going to be, so let's think for a second. We talked in the beginning about challenges to life in the desert, right? So I kind of think of a tortoise as sort of being like a walking cactus.
Yeah, I just had that image too.
Yeah, they store their water inside of their bodies too, very much like a cactus. And when your bladder gets full, you have to go to the bathroom. But their bladder is their built-in water bottle or their canteen. And they can reabsorb moisture from the water that's contained in there, and they can kind of recycle their water. So normally in the winter, a tortoise like this is going to be underground for, I don't know, half the year, right? October to April is pretty typical for when they go dormant. And so they're living off of that stored water inside of their body, much like a cactus. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about where they make their homes. Where would a tortoise like this make its house?
Certainly seems like below ground would be preferable for protection.
Absolutely. And if I turn her this way, you can kind of zoom in and see those sturdy claws right there, and those shovel kind of shaped feet. And then the shell itself is actually a bit of a bulldozer too. So if they're digging into an embankment or into some sandy soil, they can excavate with those really strong, sturdy claws and legs, and then kind of also shove some of that dirt with their shell as they're moving in and out of that opening. I've talked to researchers, again, from the U of A who have studied the depths of some of their burrows, and some of these animals can go 9 feet into an embankment. They can really get deep. So it's great. I mean, being below ground is great protection from the winter chill as well as the extreme heat of the summer. So they're gonna find a home in the rockier areas around, say in Saguaro National Park, where it's a lot more mountainous. They might also find a nice rocky crevice that they can kind of get deep into
burrow into
and use that. But so because they're reptiles, they don't make their own body heat like we do. They can't eat a sandwich and put on a jacket and stay cozy on a cold day. And their body temperature is going to really shift to be the same temperature as the world around them. So they're going to need to go deep in the ground to get away from those extremes that we have in the desert.
Like slow mo.
Yes, so this animal is obviously not very fast. What do you think Poppy is eating? Not chasing down very fast prey.
Gosh, well,
right?
I'm imagining the desert, and I'm thinking, well, a lot of tortoises like leafy greens, but I can't think of many leafy greens that come to mind. So
in the late spring, after a good winter,
rain,
there will definitely be leafy greens and fresh tender grasses. The native grasses are great food for them.
Okay.
And then in summer, what do you imagine they might
I'm
eat?
thinking about those saguaro fruits.
Yeah, so they would eat a lot of different kinds of cactus fruit. Prickly pear is their preference because that's ripe during
those big, beautiful purple.
Yes, and those are ripe during the after the summer rainy season. So there's a lot more food available then. It's funny because in our programs at the Desert Museum, our tortoises that we use in our programming, when there's cactus fruit available, we often give that to them when we're doing a demonstration so
Right.
people can see how they eat. They have a beak, they don't have teeth, so they
Right.
can bite into that fruit, and then they get that pulp all inside, and then
Yeah.
they're excellent seed spreaders
Oh,
because they don't destroy the seeds when they eat them. They don't grind them up with their mouths, and then they pass through in a little package of fertilizer, and they help spread those seeds around.
Interesting. I am thinking about our desert, and I'm thinking about threats, which sometimes we see with drought, sometimes with fire. What other types of threats do we see that are threatening to our animal inhabitants?
Yeah, so the biggest threat to the Sonoran Desert ecosystem is actually a non-native grass known as Buffelgrass. I'm sure you've heard of
I
it.
sure
There's
have.
a lot of awareness
Yeah.
about it out there.
Yeah.
And I have an example of the plant here. It's a really scruffy, kind of raspy plant. It's got a lot of spiky hairs along all the nodes. And you can see that it has these bottle brush looking inflorescences and seed heads. So this plant appeared in the Sonoran Desert region. We brought it here in the 1930s. It is originally from Africa and Asia, and it was brought here as cattle feed. You know, if you plant it in the desert, it provides forage for cattle. And then also as erosion control, because back then people were really worried about topsoil, you know, as the Dust Bowl days, et cetera.
Right.
So, so that was why it was brought here. And a lot of times that's how introductions happen, right? Plants that are not from an area or animals that are not from an area, people think, oh, this could be
To
useful.
solve a problem. Or,
Yeah,
Right.
and then it
right.
ends up being a problem of its own.
Right.
So this plant, because it's from a warm environment, it did well here. And when we have good rainfall years, then it flourishes. So what happens is it is non-native. So you know, if you think about the saguaro that we talked about,
Right.
how saguaro cacti and other desert plants, they have an environment that is not adapted to fire. There's usually a lot of space in between plants. You know,
Right.
imagine when
You
you take a
notice
hike
that.
in the desert, there's a lot of open ground.
A lot
You
of
see the
open
gravel
ground.
all around and the
Yep.
sand. And what happens is that this plant then moves in and it fills all those gaps. And what do you think it's doing to all that native vegetation?
Sucking up all that water.
Right. So they're out competing the native
Yeah.
plants, right?
Yeah.
And then the other problem with this plant is that it carries fire. So it was adapted to fire. And where it lives in the savannas, there's big fires that periodically move through, and then it bounces back because it gives it a little fertilizer from the ash, and it sprouts right back up from the roots when the rains come. So a few years ago, you know, a lot of people have probably seen Buffelgrass around town and not realized
Right.
it. You can
Right.
see it on the slopes of a mountain. It looks very yellowy a lot of the year and sometimes green. A few years back, when the 4th of July fireworks happened, one of the fireworks sparked a Buffelgrass fire on the mountain.
Dear.
And the grass burned all of the desert vegetation, and then, you know, that all charred, but the grass came right back as soon as the summer monsoon rain started.
Right.
And so you could see very readily how it just moved right in and changed that slope from
Right.
desert to grassland.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So there's still Buffelgrass all over a mountain?
There's still Buffelgrass on a mountain, but the city is working on how to treat that right now. So it's not going to always be there.
Yeah.
And then when the Bighorn fire happened in the Catalinas in the summer of last year, there was the concern that that would carry fire from the higher parts of the mountain down to the homes that were in the foothills. And fortunately, from what we've seen, it looked like a lot of the fire, because of the wind directions and the fact that it avoided the southern facing slopes, the fire tended to. And because of trails and other kinds of fire breaks that the fire crews made, we dodged a bullet on that one.
Wow.
And so there wasn't as much Buffelgrass fire carried from the big fire down into the houses as we had feared.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So even though it seems like an insurmountable problem, because these seeds are, you know, it multiplies very easily.
Right.
It's also something that it's very easy for everybody to tackle. And
Right.
so,
Right.
yeah.
So I like that. Okay.
Find out, get your ID online, find out what it looks like, get out there and
Totally.
help solve the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. That was really amazing information. And thank you so much for sharing those incredible animals.
You are so
We're so
welcome. Thanks for
excited.
having me here.
Yeah,
It was so much fun.
So tell us a little bit about what the museum offers to our families.
Yeah, so we are open And you can reserve tickets online right now or call our ticket window. All that's available through our website. And that we're open to limited numbers right now, just with the county's protocols on COVID. When that's over, you know, people can come out in droves again.
Right.
We also offer virtual online programming.
Yeah, which is great stuff.
Yep, and that's
super cool.
A lot of different things for different sizes of audiences and different topics. So you can, again, check out our website to find out what we're offering for those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm trying to think about any, I'm thinking about all the other special areas. The hummingbird exhibit is still open, everything is still open.
Desert Museum is 85% outdoors already. So
Right,
it's
so
easy
it's
to social
fabulous,
distance.
right,
And it's
right.
just such a great time of year to be out
It's
there.
a wonderful time of year. And April is coming up, and that is an amazing time of the year to visit the Desert Museum with everything
absolutely.
blooming.
Yes, so there will be wildflowers.
Yeah, yeah, well,
Even without rain, the Desert Museum, you know, we're out there, we do try to water some of our vegetation to keep it alive. So,
okay, great.
Yeah, so you can always find wildflowers.
All
on
right.
grounds. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that we've learned a lot from Robin. Thank you so much for sharing all those amazing things and things that we can do as inhabitants of this beautiful Sonoran Desert. So I encourage everybody to check out the Arizona-Sonoran Desert Museum website.
DesertMuseum.org.
There we go. Yep. Super easy. And you can find activities and all sorts of other cool things. And we also have a really cool opportunity. We've got some grab and go kits at several of our Pima County Public Library branches. And those kits are going to have some really cool surprises in there from the Desert Museum. We've got some cool PBS Kids items as well. And again, a huge thank you to Robin and the Sonoran Desert Museum for bringing these very special guests.
Oh, great
to
pleasure.
Meet our public.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.